Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Nick and this is On Buddhism, a series of short introductory video lectures on topics of Buddhism. Today we're here to conclude our study of the life of the Buddha. We're going to talk about the passing of Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha. This story is covered in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. The words of that title all carry with it the meaning of what's going on here. Nirvana is, as we've talked about, the state of being liberated from samsara, from the cycle of birth and death. Parinirvana sort of means like the perfect nirvana. Parinirvana is a whole other level of nirvana where you're actually removed from dualistic thinking of nirvana and samsara. Mahaparinirvana means the great, perfect nirvana. This is simply just an adjective added on to the title because of the epicness and the gravity of the moment of the passing of the Buddha. It's also meant to talk about and describe the type of passing that the Buddha underwent. Once he had passed, he was in the perfect nirvana, the greatest perfect nirvana. He became part of the one eternal Buddha, which is covered in his sermon. So the Buddha has been traveling and giving sermons, and those sermons have been written down in sutras, and the Sangha, the community of Buddhists, is growing very, very large. A lot of people are converting. At first, only his family converted, but then friends, and then strangers, and then notable people, nobles and celebrities, and notable Hindu people, and lots of people started to convert. And the Sangha had grown pretty large at this point. And they had been traveling around India spreading the Dharma, teaching the Dharma, and recording the Dharma. And eventually the Buddha, he's about 80 years old at this point, he tells his followers that his death is approaching. He's getting old and he can feel it starting to happen. So he finds that his death is starting to come, but he's still going around and teaching. And one day he receives alms from a blacksmith by the name of Chunda. He knows that these alms, this food that Chunda gives him, is going to kill him. But it's not because the food is bad. It's not because the food is bad. It's because the Buddha had become ill with natural old age complications already, and he just knew that his body couldn't handle it. So he receives alms from Chunda, and he says, this is going to kill me, but you gave alms. You committed the act of dana, which is almsgiving. And so you still deserve the utmost good karma, because at this point, when there are not very many lay Buddhists, and whenever the monks are surviving off of alms, this is a great karma action to give alms to a monk. So Chunda still gets amazing karma. He gives him a dish, and I won't try and tell you the name of it because it's very long and hard to pronounce. But the point of the name of it is that people actually disagree on how to translate the name. So how it is translated actually depends on the school of Buddhism that you ascribe to. According to Mahayana Buddhism, he ate mushrooms, and that's what killed him. According to Theravada Buddhism, he ate pork, and that's what killed him. So you might think, well, that's easy. Because of nonviolence, because of the first precept, there's no way he could have eaten pork. But actually, at this time, we have to think about Buddhists do not, at this point and onward, do not care what food they're given. They just eat it because it's alms. They're not going to pass alms back to the giver and be like, do you have a vegetarian option? It doesn't happen that way. So they ate whatever they were given, and the karma of eating pork was not bad. The karma of killing a pig was bad. The karma of cooking a pig was bad. But that karma was not bestowed upon the monks at that time. And so the reason why Mahayana Buddhists translate the name of the dish as mushrooms is because they emphasize ahimsa, nonviolence. So for their teaching purposes, it made more sense to make this mushrooms. Theravada Buddhists emphasize dana, or almsgiving, right? Because if you remember, Theravada Buddhism is not Buddhism for lay people like Mahayana. Theravada is for people who want to become monastics. They want to go live monastic life and survive solely on alms. So they emphasize the alms giving, the dana, and so they call it pork, because that emphasizes, even though Buddhists do not want to eat things that have been alive and incur that bad karma, they ate it because it was alms. People gave what they had, and the monks ate what they got. So the Buddha eats this, and he gives his last sermon. In his last sermon, which is covered in this sutra, he goes over topics of the Dharma. He says that after I am passed, you will still have the Dharma and what you all have written down so far as teachers. So continue to study and continue to write, and you will do fine. You'll be just fine without me. He also, once again, enforces and poses an argument for the Buddha nature. So if you remember, the Buddha nature, or the Buddha Dhatu, is the inherent and original and universal property of all reality, that everything and everyone is capable of enlightenment, and that actually that is their original state. The question that is posed, maybe not in these exact words, but the question that was buzzing around everyone's minds at the time was, how does one reach enlightenment and know that they have reached enlightenment at all? It's possible for someone who's not studying Buddhism, who doesn't have the vocabulary, to reach enlightenment and not know that they have reached enlightenment. But we all know that there is something inherent and original in us that is enlightened. Something, we call it the soul, we call it the spirit, we call it our spiritual sides. We all know that we all have some sort of inclination toward believing in and understanding things that we can't see, touch, taste, smell, or hear. And so the Buddha's response is, we all have Buddha nature. We're just returning to that original state. We're returning to our original selves as we study Buddhism, as we work towards our enlightenment. And if you remember correctly, some of the Dogen works that we've read and some of the other ones that we've read talk about studying the self and forgetting the self and allowing us to return to that enlightened state. They act as if it's a journey back home rather than a journey somewhere else. So he re-emphasizes that in his last sermon. And he also speaks about his death. Allegedly, his last words are, all sankharas decay, strive for the goal with diligence. Sankharas means minds or bodies or selves. All selves decay, strive for the goal with diligence. That's interesting. That can be interpreted as saying, strive for the goal of death with diligence. I personally don't think that that's what he's saying. I don't think that he's saying strive for death with diligence. He's talking about the goal. In Buddhism, we've talked about how enlightenment can be thought of as the goal, but is not actually the goal. Practice and study is the goal. So strive for the goal with diligence could also mean strive for parinirvana with diligence. It could also mean strive for practice and study with diligence. No one really knows what the goal is. And that's sort of an interesting part of the Buddha's story, is the goal is sort of left to interpretation based on who was listening and who was writing down. If you listen to Theravada Buddhists, Theravada scholars and patriarchs, the goal is enlightenment. The goal is to become a monk and study and live off of alms and follow the precepts and follow the Eightfold Path and study the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths and the Sutras and reach enlightenment on your own. According to them, it's a very sudden, you got it, done, zap out of reality whenever the time comes. You're good, you're done. For Mahayana Buddhists, it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. Enlightenment, as we talked about, is a gradual process. You learn one thing, and then that thing builds on itself, and then that builds on itself, and then on and on and on and on it goes, allegedly for 52 stages. Remember, we've talked about the 52 stages of the Bodhisattva path. And so this can, in both cases, this can span over many lifetimes. But the goal for Mahayana Buddhists is studying, because practice is itself enlightenment. That's a Mahayana quote. Practice is itself enlightenment. So with diligence, the goal is to, no matter what you do it well, do it diligently, do it regularly, and do it wholeheartedly. And so in that last sentence, strive for the goal with diligence, you can also say this goal is anything else. Your goal could be getting a new job. Your goal could be being the best spouse you can possibly be. Your goal could be anything. Because all sankharas decay. Because our time is limited. We are only sure of this 80 years, if we're lucky, that we have. So because of that, we need to be diligent. We need to work hard, and we need to focus and concentrate. We can't be distracted. We can't waste our time. We have to do our very best to get where we want to be. This last sentence opens up Buddhism to being a philosophy rather than an exclusive religion, one that you can adapt to any religion. It's possible in Buddhism to be a Buddhist and a Christian. It's possible to be a Buddhist and be Muslim or Jewish. It's possible to be Buddhist and Taoist. It's possible to be Buddhist and atheist, because there's no gods, there's no holy text that claims superiority over the other ones, in a sense that it doesn't claim to be written by the hand of God. It doesn't claim to be the universal capital T truth. There's followers that claim that about texts, but there's no texts that say that themselves. There's nothing that you can really point to and say this makes it a religion. You can just say it suggests that it is a religion and that the practice is similar to religion. But you can be a Buddhist anything, because you can interpret it as a philosophy and a way of life. And I would argue that adapting Buddhist philosophy to your life would make you a better Christian, would make you a better Jewish person, would make you a better Muslim, would make you a better anything, would make you a better baseball player, would make you a better atheist, a better scientist, a better soccer player, a better householder. Anything that you want to be, adapting Buddhist principles to that is helpful. Because the thing is, the story of the Buddha, as I've said since the beginning, is not unique to him. The story of the Buddha mirrors a story of all of us and just takes it several steps further. So meditate on the death of the Buddha, and meditate on all sankharas decay, strive for the goal with diligence, because that's an important teaching, and that opens it up to a lot of interpretation. So think about that and try and understand that as best you can. I hope you've learned something and found something interesting from this. I wish you all the best health, happiness, and joy during the coronavirus pandemic and beyond, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.